I'll hit record and I'll say, "Welcome to Sociocrafting the Future." At this stage, this yeah,
We need
at
some.
this stage,
We need some intro. We need an intro and whole
yeah,
like.
no theme music, no listeners, so that's all right. We're we're getting some kinks out, so that's fine. But I guess the thing is, if you ever do get listeners, they can always come back. So
Yeah, hard. See
um,
where it all began.
yeah,
I was talking to a mate of mine, and she was saying, "Oh man," I was discussing all of our kind of ideas and concepts and our Whanake thinking. She was, "Man, you should do a podcast." I was like, "Well, you know what? We are." So here it is. Here's the backlog.
nice. Yeah, Sociocrafting the Future podcast, episode 4, I think,
Hmm.
and we said last time we were gonna start off with um, just a random observation about black holes and mitochondria because we thought it could spark some interesting stuff. But I was reading an article, a research paper about pulsars and quasars, as it had been a while since I had read about them, and there's that field I think has been advancing quite a bit as we get more powerful telescopes. But how did it? They were just talking about certain types of black hole. Oh, there was just one not throwaway, but there was just a random line in the article or the paper that said they're the most efficient things we know of at converting matter to energy. And
Wow.
as the matter sucked in towards a black hole during that process, like a lot of energy is released. Like anything that crosses event horizon doesn't ever leave. It always goes towards the black hole. But the journey towards that for the particles along the way, as they're exposed to the extreme environment, a lot of energy is released. And then they said something that like certain ones, I think it's like fast rotating black holes, they can convert about 40% of that matter into energy.
Heck.
And yeah. So I just thought that was super interesting, and it made me think about power sources. And then there was some theoretical physicists that had like hypothetical ways to basically make a power plant out of black holes and like harvest the energy. And I was just thinking about our potential aspirational civilization and different ways to function in the universe. And then to finish the story, I don't know what made me think about it, but I guess when you look at a diagram like the old school diagrams of an atom, and you see the nucleus and you see the electron orbits, and at least how they lay it out looks identical to a map of a star system with a central star and a bunch of planetary orbits.
Mm.
And so I just started connecting a few things, and I was like, okay, well, so I was thinking, okay, so a black hole, it seems to be functioning at providing energy out into the galaxy, right? Like it's taking some matter and then it's converting some of that into energy and distributing that out into the galaxy. And it made me think of, I think when you're a little kid and you hear about a black hole, it's a little bit terrifying. It
Mm.
like seems like some sort of destructive, evil thing. But then I thought, oh, like that's quite it's providing this service to the galaxy. They seem to be finding a supermassive black hole at the center of every galaxy. So I was like, starting to look at it as like, okay, it's a function. It's providing a function. It's like an organelle or the nucleus of a cell, and maybe its function is like a mitochondria, which is to provide energy to the system. And then I looked up cellular metabolism, and I was like, let me just check this. What's the conversion rate of like cellular respiration? And it converts about 40% of its fuel source into energy for the system. I was like, well, that's pretty weird.
That must be like no, I don't want to say like a universal limit, but that's a cool observation, bro. Um,
Yeah.
my mind, I've been thinking about and talking about setting up a compost in our town. And, a compost is like a hub that takes resources, organic matter, and then reconverts it out into the community as soil that can be used to enrich, um, the town or the local environment. And I was like, man, black holes is like huge compost piles in the center of galaxies that are just taking matter and just putting it back out as energy to be reused. That's what I had in my head.
Yeah. The compost heap / mitochondria of the galaxy.
I'm just thinking that's either like these universal laws or clues to universal laws that are just present out there, the micro and macro, the ultimate ends of those spectrums. Or the person writing black holes was looking at the person writing mitochondria, and they're just like, yeah, we're at the same thing. But that's a cool observation, cool coincidences at the biggest and smallest scales. Yeah, there's some patterns between the macro and the micro scale that are kind of emerging, and I remember you always talking about pattern language, or what was the book you mentioned last time, like around the different patterns and fractals and the larger scales and those patterns there being mirrored in the smaller scales of things.
Yeah, this because we talked about scale invariance as like a principle of, I don't know, maybe of good observation, like, or not good, but it seems to be that if you're observing a pattern, a universal pattern, then you should be able to find an expression of it at all scales. And then I think we also mentioned that, there's this like, I don't know, ancient Western esoteric maxim or saying that as above, so below, which is basically that's expressing scale invariance, basically. That the patterns you observe on the large scale, you can observe on the small scale and vice versa. So if you have access to a certain scale, you can infer a lot of information about the other ones, even if you might not be able to directly observe them, is one, I guess, takeaway. Well, there's many takeaways, I guess. But yeah, it was just interesting to see those sort of markers between a cell and a galaxy.
It's just thinking now, it's scale invariance being a feature of our natural world. And then it makes me think of, okay, what type of civilizations, what are our future civilizations going to look like, and how will scale invariance be present there? And then it made me think of, well, economies of scale is scale variance. When you do something with a big enough scale, things cost less. And so it makes me think, does that align with a potential natural law of scale invariance? And then I jump to, well, economies of scale, present in materialist, capitalist economies. And then in my mind, when there are economies of scale in place, something in the environment and ecosystem is missing out, because it's not sticking to that law, or there's something that's been missed out or exploited to veer on the side of scale variance. No, it's just interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. It's not behaving in a similar fashion. It's behaving in like the opposite of that, where it doesn't really function that well at a micro scale.
I like that. Oh, well, and I remember writing down scale invariance when we were talking in our earlier discussions around what does this future society or the state of societies need to look like. And I think that's probably one thing we should come back to, because if a household, if a community, if a city, if a country all operate on the same principles, what is the scale invariant principle set that allows all those things to function, but are similar across all levels?
Yeah,
and yeah, because the things like collectivizing and hyper-collaboration, hyper-transparency seem like things that happen or can happen at a small scale, but I don't know if they are present in a big scale. So there's probably what needs to happen so that they can be present as the scale of something goes up. Because I can think of a community garden I can think of when you talked about that place in China where this food is just free and they give it out because it's all equally operated. But I don't know if you scale that up, what does it look like? Mate, these are yarns off the back of your mitochondria and black hole
Yeah,
discussions that are.
I'm glad you could apply it to our mission at Whanake Foundry, and that is, bro, it made me think of so many things around um, how. Well, first of all, that the pattern language book that I mentioned, that's really scale invariant patterns, isn't it? Because he's saying, here's a pattern that could apply at your desk or a corner of your room up to a large landscape or regional scale, and that you can learn and use these patterns to create. And I was thinking like elegant systems. It's like a marker that the system is really elegant or well designed, maybe
Mm,
that it's invariant, and that if you don't have the elegance in the design, then it's scale invariant, right? It can only function at certain scales. I think that's, at least in my mind, a good way. It's a good tag to add. It's like, oh, that's an elegant design because it can function at any scale
mm,
effectively.
mm,
And then you were mentioning these things, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's true. And maybe that's what decentralized blockchain Web3 type of architecture can allow
mm,
things to be efficient at a small scale, which otherwise you would need a lot of infrastructure and overhead to do. Like, oh, we can't do governance. We can't monitor the authenticity or share data, because who can manage and set up all the infrastructure for just my room or this little community garden, because it's not cost effective. But if it is cost effective through decentralized blockchain tech, well, that's, I think it's pretty easy
yeah.
to see how you can apply that at a big scale, like, which is the network state type of concept, right?
Mm.
I mean, even in his book and his presentations, he shows the scale from the micro to the macro and how the network state can function. So I think, yeah, that's a good point.
Um, that's wicked. That's a tag, I suppose, a tag or principle or something to always keep a lookout for, that scale and variance. Because yeah, you do want to achieve efficiencies that you can get at the large scale, but you don't want to have to. But there's so many barriers and capital barriers to overcome to do that. And yeah, like if we can use technology, AI efficiencies or blockchain or whatever is out there to allow us to achieve those efficiencies at a small scale, then it's wicked.
It makes me think of the social architecture component that, like, applying that same type of thinking over on that side could be really useful as far as those systems, um, and using the scale invariance as just a marker that you're on the right track, or that, you know what I
Mm,
mean, that it's a potential.
we're we're operating in a way that's not compatible with scale and variance. I think we've operated in a way that exploits, takes from our environment, which may have been all right with a certain population or with a certain system or certain size, but as we go, you can just project that it's not gonna end well if we carry on in these ways. It's not suitable for a growing population.
No, it's definitely, it's not suitable for progressing along the Kardashev scale,
Mm.
because those scales of civilization would, in this game A, would need such huge reserves of material to exploit because they're so inefficient, right?
Mm. What's some things we can unpack? Like you just mentioned the Kardashev scale, and I don't know if we've talked about the Kardashev scale um, or social scale similar to that, because
Yeah.
when we talk about Kardashev, it's a tech civilization type scale, eh? And this
Yes.
that's yeah, but this podcast socio crafting was a word because it's about crafting a social focused future instead of a technocratic type future. And what are all the things that come when you just come away from from technology being at the core. So should we talk about? But
Yeah,
should we talk about that, or what are some other things?
I think it's good. It's probably a good time to return to that and to explore that and share and develop our thoughts. I mean, basically, we saw that we were, I don't know, somehow the Kardashev scale came up, and like you said, that's a way to measure the total exploitation or harvest of energy of a civilization, and to like delineate a civilization based on how much energy it can harness. Um, and in some ways, it's aspirational because I don't think many people think at those scales. I
Mm,
think that's what's cool about it to me is that it forces you to think about scales which we don't usually think about. I mean, when it starts to talk, I mean, the first, I think the stage one on Kardashev is harnessing the like total energy of a planet, which is like I think most people you get them there pretty quick. But then you talk about harvesting the totality of your stars of the star in your star system,
mm.
and you're talking about what's the name of the
The
hypothetical structure?
Dyson, I think, of the Dyson
Dyson
sphere.
sphere. Yeah. You get to those levels and it forces you to think in really different scales, which is super interesting. But as you were alluding to, we were like, back to the game A, game B problem. It's like without social wisdom, social architecture that's founded on wisdom and in our view, on animism, creating a scaffolding of social architecture that can guide evolution along or development along this Kardashev scale, it is likely just to remain how it is now, which is, I guess, there's one quick point on that is, we can talk about all these different metrics and people can argue, oh, it's okay to extract, it's not okay. But I think another interesting data point is this is just not enjoyable for most people right now. If you look at rates of depression, suicide, satisfaction, loneliness, like all those markers are just showing people don't enjoy existing like they are now. And I think that's a good good of reason as any to just say like as humans, why are we perpetuating this thing that none of us really enjoy participating in?
Mm,
Yet we are the people driving it. So, anyways, it was just a little thing that came to me around. You can argue about how you look at the natural world. Is it living? Is it dead? Is it okay to extract the X mineral or not? But you can't argue with the data that people are generally miserable in this type of society. And I think it's always nice when you have a data point that's not really arguable.
mm,
You can't really, no, people are happier now than they've ever been. So we said we need something to guide a shift to guide all the technology, right? That would make Kardashev 1, 2, 3, 4 civilizations enjoyable and harmonious to exist in. Is that
mm.
fair to say?
Yeah, that's definitely the challenge that we were presented with when we were looking at the Kardashev scale. That set of Type One civilization harnesses all the power of their natural resources and controls everything. But then, what is the social structure in that society? Like, who then controls that infinite power? Like, infinite on that scale? Is it just within the small 1%, and then is everyone just in this dystopian world where you're just a number? Even though there's limitless power, there'll still be authority telling you oppression, depression, all of those stats are
Mm.
they're not. Um, it would be remiss of us to say that they are linked together. Where if you go up the Kardashev scale, you also go up the social well-being or these other scales. So we were thinking, oh, what would a social scale look like? And then if you got a 1, 2, 3 Kardashev civilization where 3 is you control all the power of the black hole at the center of your whole super galaxy or whatever. Maybe we don't think of that. Maybe we just go between now and maybe 1 where we control all the type 1. So we were like, I think we were saying, well, where would we be right now? And I think someone said we were 0.7 or something, 0.73 or.
Yeah.
So what would 0.74 look like, or what would on the social scale? what does it look like to get from 0.73 to 0.74 to zero point 0.8? What does that all look like?
Yeah.
And then the other questions we were asking is, what does it look like from here to there? And then what does day-to-day life look like? What does socializing look like? What does infrastructure look like? Where do you get food from? Where do you play? What do communities look like? And then what do they look like in different biomes, in different parts of our world, of coastal, in all the way inland and mountains and desert, all these different in city, urban environments.
Mm.
What do they look like from now until that future state across all of these different biomes and all of these different types of activities? And we had 3 axes, and then we were thinking, oh, that would be, it's kind of a cube that you could form, and that's kind of where our cube, our what do we call the cube?
The vision cube?
Our vision cube. Yeah, that's the vision cube holding,
Our tesseract.
yeah, all those states of being. And it would be so cool, like a tesseract, to look into it and be like, wow, that's the map. That's what we need to follow. I can see myself here. I can see myself doing these in my own environments, and it's enjoyable. I'm looking at society. I'm not looking at the advancement of technology alone, but I'm looking at my role and my place within the society that is advancing.
And we were saying that, well, this is what Whanake and you and I are working on, but, we think it's valuable for everyone to work on in their own way, is to, through written and spoken word and increasingly through generative AI, if you're not blessed to be an incredible digital or traditional artist, right? If you don't have those skills, what generative AI, I guess the positive side is it opens up the ability for people to translate some things they might have in their head or some visions or some imagination and to put it in a format that's more easily shareable. And I guess even ChatGPT or large language models can even support people to express imagination and visions in a written form. So we were saying, what we're going to do is use these tools to explore and to describe, but also show visually in stills and increasingly as technology improves in videos or animated formats, what the different steps along the way could look like, and help flesh out through that process what social architecture we would imagine you would need to maintain these really beautiful and exciting components of that civilization, right? Like crafting the complementary scale that would allow progression on a Kardashev scale to occur in a really benevolent, beautiful, enjoyable way. Because, you've got Kardashev, what makes me think of a few things. Kardashev talking about, harnessing, right? And it's like, that's, I guess, a non-relational way. Well, there is a relationship, but I don't know if it's intentional, but it becomes sort of a extraction and exploitation, right? But what if you have an animist foundation? Then it's like, how do we have a relationship with these things that produce energy and have like an exchange that's mutually beneficial? And that's, I think, a lot richer way to conceive of
versus an extraction based metric. Could you have a relational based metric between people and where we live in the animist, wasn't an animist foundation? That's cool. That's like it's a cool way of articulating it.
Like, how do you, so in that sense, a type 1 civilization on our scale has a conscious relationship with all components of the planet, and then a type 2 has a conscious and active relationship with every part of
your solar system.
And type 3, you have an active and conscious relationship between your civilization and all parts of the galaxy, all things in the galaxy.
Wouldn't that be so cool to be a part of? That's so cool.
And compatible
Yeah,
with, much more compatible with an indigenous way of life.
I just before you go, I had
Yeah.
in our mind we had a vision cube, which and
Yeah.
the three axes were it was time from now until whenever the time is we're going to achieve that state of maybe a type one
Yeah.
civilization. There was time, then there was the ecosystems, the different biomes,
Oh yeah.
and then the third axis was activities. Like what would you be doing? But I think there's one more which takes it to the tesseract, which is what around scale and variance. And I think that it has to be if we have a relationship with everything, what does that look like at a global scale, and what does that look like at a household scale? So those, I think that's the one other dimension. Just going off the
Mm.
start of our conversation that we may need to capture within our vision cube or vision tesseract, because the cube could be appropriate for a large scale, but then it might not reflect day-to-day life
Mm.
in just a little village versus the infrastructure that we'll need to talk with the rest of the solar system.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that
It's also really, go
that
ahead,
was all.
bro.
I just had to say that. I just had to chuck the scale of variance part into the vision cube so it was there. But I love the way you've articulated a type 1 civilization on the social scale, um, this relational scale. That's wicked.
Yeah, that's such an exciting way to look at it, to imagine measuring relational strength and connectivity between society and the other components of this larger living system on the planet, you know?
Mm.
And it also is really exciting because it gives you a little bit of direction on what sort of techniques, technologies, social systems you might need to increase relational connectivity, right? Because in some senses, well, many senses, some information technology has increased that. Some of the general infrastructure of the internet, the way we're connecting and we're going to podcast is increasing connectivity
Mm-hmm.
between components of this, planetary system. But it also, I think, can give you areas worth exploring or give us around what other things could increase relational connectivity. What other techniques, modes of being. Yeah, it's fascinating.
I think our last conversation was the animist foundation and the materialist foundation, and now it's kind of getting to uh, within a materialist foundation there are extraction based actions, and within our animist foundation or society there are relational based actions. These may not be the right words, but the general gist.
Yeah.
And then, so within the materialist scale, the Kardashev is how much energy you can extract, and within the animist side, it's around how well or how what's the word with it? How relation or how well you can achieve relationship, or how strong. Because
It's
extraction seems like a finite thing. Like extraction then is fully gone. But I feel like relationals you can have almost a limitless,
infinite.
an
Yeah.
infinite strength of relation. Um,
True. Well, I guess you would like to be able to measure the quality and the amount of relational connections between.
Yeah, and so then you're getting to on the relational side, it's about the quality of the relationship. On the extraction side, it's about the quantity of
Yeah.
material extracted. Um,
Yeah.
and
It's like a utilization metric. Like how
yeah,
much of the star's energy are we utilizing?
yeah,
And obviously that's within that frame of utilizing is mostly to make more gadgets and economic activity.
mm,
So even that metric's pretty narrow, right? Because you could utilize, well, we're utilizing half of it to actually like create a cosmic beacon of, I don't know, that lets us all telepathically link up and expand our imaginary potential a millionfold. You could apply it to other things, but I think in that sense, in the Kardashev scale, it's mostly applied to quote productive use,
mm.
aka making money off making stuff.
The cool thing about thinking about it in this way is they usually if you think on this animist side, you think at a village level, you think at a immediate environment in my relation, and then so default you don't think interplanetary travel and growing beyond your solar system. But I think this way, in terms of the quality of your relationship between all things on the planet, from your local ecosystem to this global ecosystem, how strong our connections are, relational connections are, it can then extend. Like then it brings into this narrative, it extends beyond just our planet. When you're thinking of civilization growth on the Kardashev scale,
Yeah.
then it does encourage expansion, but not expansion for like not imperialist expansion, not extraction led expansion, but relational. Um,
Bro, I love that.
yeah.
Yeah, then you're like, because in my head, as we've been talking, I keep thinking about how different base layers of your society affect the why that your society has. You know,
Mm,
because I always go back to, well, why we do any of this? Why do you just infinitely want to extract more energy and make more things? There's not a clear why given, right?
mm,
It's just like, but what you said is so cool. Like, why do we want to get to this next star system, next galaxy? We want to connect and build a relationship with all the stuff there. It's more potential connections into this growing community, family. You know, it's like that's a really beautiful desire. I think.
mm,
You like, who knows what's there to connect with, and what incredible richness it could add to this connectivity and to this community, right?
mm.
So it's like, oh man, that's such I think, a positive drive for exploration.
Ah, that is. Like yeah, well,
And
that is though. But it's like it's actually yeah. We just this is what it's about. It's exploring socio. It's crafting it as we kind of explore. These are like life
yeah,
explorations of what we're thinking, what's potentially what's possible.
I mean, we are figuring stuff out as we go, and
Mm.
sharing that process. So it's like, oh, that's amazing. It's like, yeah, we sort of just encountered this thought for the first time. Exploration is a really powerful thing that can unite a society or a group of people. And but there's a lot of historical links to it which aren't necessarily positive.
Mm.
Even at just a mild level, it was often. I think there was genuine explorers that genuinely just loved finding the unknown. I think that's pretty okay. There's a lot of exploitation, displacement, trauma, genocide associated with it as byproducts because of what was at the base of those explorer civilizations, right?
Mm.
But I think most people recognize there is something really beautiful about this, that just the raw concept of exploration removed from the
Mm.
historical damage. And most of our different cultures have some form of exploration, in their social architecture. And I think what's beautiful about what you laid out is it's a way to have this shared aspiration of our civilization around exploration
Mm.
and connect it to a base foundation, which will help influence it to be a positive process.
Mm.
So you can have this thing, which is a nice binding, uniting component, and you can have something that helps a wisdom, a worldview that helps guide it to be non-destructive, but to actually increase novelty, increase coherence of the system, to have an anti-entropy effect.
Mm.
We're actually going out, we're connecting things.
It makes me think about like the growth of I always love thinking about forests because we live next to forests. It's the growth of a forest versus the expansion of a monoculture crop. Whereas forests grow, um, and there's synergies within all the different the diverse species that live there, and they all have the synergies and they build resilience. Um, it's kind of similar to that, the kind of expansion and incorporation. But then I was thinking of, where does the forest stop? When does the forest know, actually, no, this isn't my space, this is a whole nother ecosystem? And
Mm,
like this might be a wetland over here, and it's not going to have
Mm-hmm.
forest and then wetland. They kind of have boundaries, and they understand. No, we're not going to fully subsume you into ours. We're going to let you exist here. We're going to coexist. We're going to have a relational aspect. But then they do have a relationship in terms of maybe the water cycle that links them together, or different when you take it at a macro lens. And so I'm thinking, how do we have relational um, how do we create relationships beyond our planet, even just beyond our country, in a
Mm-hmm.
way that we can respect each other's ways of being and enhance each other's
Mm-hmm.
ways of being, but without saying we're all one. We're all a forest. Whereas if you look in the forest, it's all everything's unique and different. But then a forest can be different to a wetland, can be different to coastal environment. Yes, I'm just thinking those are some other thoughts of um, maybe that's a scale and variance example as well. Um, there's richness and diversity at all scales, but they all are relational. So yeah, I'm just thinking just another.
No, man, it's good. I want you to keep going on that thread. It is scale invariance, and teachers are, or forests are amazing teachers, and I think areas for us to learn from. And the tree as a unit is very scale invariant to the forest because they're very similar in many ways, right? These rich ecosystems that are symbiotic between a lot of different subcomponents. So they are already, even within the forest, is a great example of sort of scale invariance. And a tree itself is a big ecosystem that has harmonious relationships between a lot of things, that creates air from, or creates oxygen from carbon, creates sugar from light, provides habitat, filters water, filters sound, does all these incredible things. Um, and then a forest is like that on a larger scale. But I love what you said. I'd love to hear you talk more about this. I think it's a great practical component to our social architecture, which is you're part of a thing. The subcomponents, the members of forest, are part of a thing. They function as individual sovereign things that can make their own choices and have their own lives, but they also part of a functional whole.
Mm,
That's, I think, the place to learn from for how we can craft social architecture, right? Do you have any
yeah.
more thoughts on
No, I think
these?
that's articulated really well. Like I think, and as you are a part of that functional whole, but then there are other functional wholes that you are also a network of, and so there's
In
an
relationship to,
in
right?
relation to. So just as you are a subcomponent of a larger whole, the whole that you are a part of is a subcomponent of something else, and they all speak together and work together in certain ways and rely on each other in certain ways. And I think that fractal shape there that can
Mm.
keep being applied at larger scales. And so there exists a relational scale invariance potentially. Um,
It's a way for us to learn how to apply it at a larger scale, right? Is
yeah,
that's what you're
yeah,
saying? Like and so we could look at a tree and then we could explain it. You either get it, or we could explain very quickly how these relationships, and there's parts and a whole, a forest, an ecosystem, and even a planet. Well, what this gives us as a guide to is like how you can conceive of that beyond a planet, which I think is where for most of us we haven't invested a lot of time in thinking, how do you do this beyond a planet?
yeah. I come back to the smaller scale too because it makes me think of we had just recently the big hui the big hui motu for te iwi Māori, and it was the first time, one of the first few times, I wouldn't say the first time, but one of the few times that Te Tai Tokerau, who are traditionally not our kingitanga iwi, they are Te Tiriti o Waitangi iwi,
Mm.
have come down to Waikato, and they had a strong presence and they were united, wanting to let everyone know we're here. And then it was also one of the first times, while I've been around, that us in Waikato, within our haka, we had Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and we never haka that on our side. Um, and so my example is like Te Tai Tokerau, Waikato, Whanau Apanui, all of these different, they are all different rākau within a forest. And they're all unique in their own ways, but they all potentially can work together as a large forest. Um, but then the other thing is, if you're trying to work with the forest, if you're something else, like I'm thinking, if you're the crown, and you think all of you are the same, well, that's
Mm.
and then so or you try and group that forest into iwi structures when they were traditionally hapu structures. You have iwi structures coming up, then that's not a relational, like between your whole and another whole. That's not a good relationship.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm just thinking, just as you had whānau marae hapu, and they're all working as part of te iwi Māori, or working towards becoming this whole unit. How you engage with another whole unit, that the other you have to work symbiotically, and it has to be kind of a back and forth, like a tentility type thing. Um, um, but yeah, because they can be compatible, but they have to. I think one whole system has to understand the other system for them to work together. And I think if we were to develop as a species on our planet and encounter and try to have planetary engagements with another whatever, we'd have to have a fuller understanding of that and not just impose our understanding of how we are on that. Anyway,
That's
more,
that's
yeah.
that's so interesting because I mean,
Yeah, but
there's a lot of wisdom in what you said, but that made me think of that. They're coming in as this large, beyond a nation, right? Like a
mm,
global empire, and then there's systems here of social order that you know,
they may not.
oh, Madai
Yeah,
in there as well, and they didn't really meet them on those layers,
yeah,
right?
and well, I'm just keen to hear your thoughts around.
Mm.
Do you think that's an incompatibility of scale, or is that maybe an incompatibility of the foundational stack? Maybe that's that, eh? Maybe if you're a forest based on an animist stack, and then there's another forest based on a materialist stack, how do you have a relationship, and then how do you also navigate the the quality? How do you achieve a quality relationship between those two worlds?
Mm.
Do you have a
I
treaty?
think,
No, you don't.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a challenge too. Is when you're interfaced with like a forest and a city,
Mm.
what happens?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
No, I mean that is a very practical question, and that's what a lot of people have been struggling with, right? I think ultimately, in my mind, I can't conceive of a healthy long term outcome. It's more like how can we survive this encounter long enough to like try to
Mm,
enlighten this materialist thing up so it doesn't like destroy us, or how do we leave, or at least in my I feel like maybe there's some way to
yeah.
conceive of it, but I can't think of a long term way to have a healthy relationship between an animist stack founded society and a materialist, because as we've said so many times, like there's a lot of things which there's a why for an animist stack. There's just no why for in a materialist. So you're like,
Mm,
hey, don't do this. They're like, why? And you're like, well, because. And they're like, well, that in our system, that's not a because.
mm,
It's not a thing. It's not another entity. It doesn't have experience. So why does it matter what I do to it?
mm.
And it's like, I can't. It would be a supremely elegant system that could engineer a harmonious thing between those two
Yeah,
that's beyond my capability, you know?
yeah. And I think in my mind, may not be even, but in my mind, I visualize an animist stacked society as a forest, um, and all the synergies, and I imagine a materialist stack as like a high tech city. In the middle, I'm like, how would they meet? And then I think Solarpunk imagery is probably trying to merge those two, and
Mm,
that is the challenge. That's the aspirational challenge to try and merge those two, because there will always be the game A, the game A and the game B, the interface and the transition, and maybe Solarpunk societies are transitional societies that may sit somewhere
mm,
along on our social scale of advancement of civilization. And that's maybe all we can we can conceive at the moment
Yeah.
is that, because that's our wildest. But that isn't really. Um, that's maybe not, if there's maybe not true relationship between all things, but a compromise at the interface.
This like a halfway, a
Yeah,
transition point.
it's like a transitional point. Which
Because I think,
yeah,
go ahead, Mark.
no, that's all. That's all.
I think when you go deep into it, and we touch on this a little bit around from an animist view, how much difference is there between the technological infrastructure that humans create and the nest of a bird, a tree, a river, right? Like it's from my understanding of philosophy and history, the division between quote natural and quote unnatural is a very monotheistic Abrahamic
Mm,
distinction. It's, and I don't think that's inherently present in an animistic outlook, right? Like there's not. And so then to me, it becomes around the quality, it becomes around the attributes of the thing, not a predetermined artificial category. Oh, humans created it, that's garbage. Oh, nature created it, that's good. You know, I think it becomes more about, is this a beautiful system? Does this enrich the cosmos? Does this not provide, it's about the attributes of the thing that you can examine rather than a category. It's like, is this a beautiful, elegant system? Does this share? Does this propagate anti-entropy? Does it increase connectivity? You know, and that's how we look at a thing. And so you can look at a technology or a type of land cover, and you could apply those same things, and then you're judging it based on these attributes rather than
mm.
it belongs to X category or group, therefore it has X just immutable attributes. But yeah, that's what I was thinking about when you were
Yeah,
talking about the Solarpunk. You know, it's like rather than judge it, does it come from this or that? It's like, what are the characteristics or attributes that it brings to
that's
the world?
that's pretty cool. The attributes and what it brings, because when you get to that natural or unnatural, or things that are created from natural world or human world, human and non-human, then you introduce a scale, and then you're introducing
Mm,
like a like, straight away of our Aboriginal whānau who weren't even on the human scale until the
yeah.
90s or something, or um, the the
Because you create a division.
yeah,
It's anti-relational, right? It's instant division.
mm,
Natural world, human world.
it's
Well, why are we different?
mm,
Aren't we from the same world?
and it's sort of like a
Are
kind
we
of,
not a part of
yeah, you create like a vertical hierarchy or
it?
spectrum, where like a horizontal spectrum where we're all at the same level and we all have uniqueness and connect at different points. And that's where I think the vision cube is a really useful tool that we've thought about, because if you just had all of this richness in a even almost a physical form or in a digital form where you could look at and you could just present that and people could just interact with it and say, oh well, we're
Yeah.
here. What does going
They can
from here to there look like? And my unique where I live and the type of place I live, and the type of scale I want to look at, if I'm just at a home residential focus, or what would a city or country look like. um, that would be such a great tool to communicate. And I think that's where we saw the value of using generative AI and developing a vision cube as a storytelling um,
Mm.
mechanism, as a communication tool, something to take this big concept and put it into just some digestible images that people can um, fill the blanks in with their mind.
And I think even it becomes a navigational device, right?
Yes.
For people, they can use it to navigate towards things that they like in it or to
Mm.
orient themselves.
Yeah. I like you talked about I just had to quickly Google it. The long now, which is at 10,000 year clock, and I think it was like Jeff Bezos. Hey, put it in there, or someone put it in there, to be like, we want to think along these long time frames. That's not really a navigational tool. That's not really where are we going. That's how long is it going to take to get somewhere, wherever that
Yeah.
is irrelevant. But I think a vision cube could could be appropriate, and you might have multiple for different scales in there. Like, but if we had that's phase two, but if we had one as a navigational tool, as something to inspire people and to provide clarity of the journey, and not just
Yeah.
say it's going to take a long time to get somewhere. That's not.
Yeah. But where are we going, and
Yeah,
why have we decided to go there?
yeah, and mapping it out so that we can clearly see together, is this where we want to go? Like, this is one way to get to a final
Hmm.
destination we all want to go on, or is it not? Do we want to go on something different? Um, and I remember, just lastly, we talked about if we were to project a vision cube for the current state, based on how we're going now, what would that look like as a contrast? Um, the antithesis of the vision cube, like
Yeah.
the Matrix, the Cyberpunk
Yeah.
2077, the all of those things.
Yeah. Materialistic game A, and what's the opposite of Solarpunk? Cyberpunk. So
Yeah,
that's the anti the anti cube anti tesseract is, yeah, materialist
game A.
game A
So, well,
cyberpunk.
that's so cool. I love this kind of
Yeah. But what you're saying is those two things, if it was a physical device and digital, but physical, there's something cool about it that you could take, you could share. I think, well, I know because we've just through 2D images already, we've seen tremendous reaction, interest, and development of different people's own internal understanding of what we're talking about here. And this device would be incredible for allowing everyone, no matter how much time you had to invest in it, to have your own thoughts, form your own thoughts, have an ability to see this thing and make decisions if you want to align with that and say, yes, I'd like to. It allows people to, I think, quickly get a sense of what it is, quickly get a sense of where this thing is going, and be able to make a decision, an informed decision, if they would like to be a part of that, if they like to put their support behind it.
a vision cube where you could get pull apart and look at each part of that cube and be like,
Yeah,
this is cool. This is what I like here. I'd like to see myself in this, or this would be better. And then
yeah.
being able to use that as a sense making tool to figure out, is this something that's cool? Nah, let's work it. What a cool session.
It's the building blocks for people to be able to interact with what we're talking about and to be a part in an appropriate scale to them of contributing to the direction of a new civilization, right? Everyone is going to have a different amount of interest, ability, capacity. And what I think what we've talked about the Vision Cube doing is often what traditional governments, philanthropics, non for profits do now is they sort of just come to people and they're like, what do you guys want for this? What do you guys want for this? And they might bring rudimentary building blocks for them to play with. That's a best case scenario. But I think what we're talking about with the Vision Cube, the Vision Tesseract, is it's a much more rich uh, container of building blocks for
Mm.
them to go, I like this, I like this, I don't like this, this is cool, and it's a way I think that empowers people, right, to contribute without having to, like you and me, try and start a whole, you know,
So,
legal entity and get right. Like not everyone's going to do that, and it'll it makes it more equitable, right, for
yeah,
people to contribute to a collective
and
vision.
it minimizes the barrier to entry into this discussion because you can just see it immediately, touch it, and interact with it.
You got time for one more thing, or do
Yeah,
you
no,
want to
no,
just
no,
stop?
that's all good. That's cool. I'm just so happy with this exploration, this session that we've kind of had a lot of these thoughts, but seeing the the duality, the dichotomy, maybe
Mm,
of the animist, materialist, the game A, the game B, the cyberpunk, the solar punk. the future, the extraction and the relational scale, and them just being on two different trajectories and two different cubes that people can just grab and see and be like, wow, I want to input it this way. I see this and I see myself in this type of future, and this is something worth getting up for to create that. That's wicked.
Yeah, I love that last piece. And I think there's a lot for us to reflect on. I think the realization around, you're like, how do we measure this other thing though? And then just like, well, can we measure the quality and the amount of relationships, and to conceive of that as a motivation for exploration to increase and grow this beautiful network of connectivity, and to add more richness to all the subcomponents, all the learnings and the wisdom of scale invariance and learning from elegant systems, forests and trees, like so much dense wisdom, but also I think practical ways to conceive of how do we organize this? What is the social motivation for the civilization? How do we measure progress or conceive of progress? And there's some tangible things there. And this leads me onto the other thing that I wanted to discuss, which was we've mentioned this video, this trilogue that Daniel Schmachtenberger had with, get their names, John Verbeek and Ian McGilchrist. And they're talking about there was a sacred dimension to existence, without making it religious or not, but there was something that there was a transcendent component to existence, and that thing in and of itself, in a relationship with that sacred, provides tremendous meaning to people, and in and of itself is a reason just to explore, to just explore this infinite, transcendent sacred realm that has a relationship with a sort of more physical world. And that itself was like basically an infinite reservoir of why to fuel a very meaningful life and society. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting to pose that to you, the role of the sacred in this animist solarpunk game B civilization, the role of the sacred in social architecture.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. There's but it is present, like in our local animist node here in Te Ao Māori. There's the terrestrial knowledge and the things that are here, and there's the not extraterrestrial, but what's the word? The Māori word is the kauairunga and the kauairaro, things that are of here, and then things that are of the realm above. And
cosmic realm.
Yeah. All the physical and the metaphysical, and having a strong, like I like how you articulated. You have an infinite source of why, and drive to do things, to gain inspiration from and to gain strength from. And I think if those sources are linked to our taiao, to our ecosystems as well, then that is a symbiotic relation. I like the idea that your the physical here is a representation also of the metaphysical, because if you put something spiritual or metaphysical somewhere else that's not here, that I can't physically see or engage with or practice or immerse myself in, then it removes your relationship with our planet and our environment. But if it's embedded within, if the spirituality exists within the environment and within our ecosystems, then a relational way of being can exist. And I think that's within Te Ao Māori at least, and it's drawing from that animist perspective, the divinity of our environment. But yeah, no, that's that's my 2 cents.
Because in an animist outlook, there's whatever the problem is. Obviously, we know the words are they're loaded with baggage.
Yep.
But if we try to view them without historical baggage, if we just try to use the word sacred or
Neo-animist.
yeah,
Yeah.
the neo-animist outlook. True. In the neo-animist worldview, the sacred is um, present in everything.
Mm.
Like the animating force, this transcendent component. It's not separate. It's there might be vast
Yep.
other realms that we have no idea of, but it's also equally present here as equally present everywhere that
Yep.
we have a
and
so
and it may not be fully here with us, but it is represented. It is
yeah,
manifested here. Um,
in a way that's appropriate to this.
Man, I like This is a side note, but also relative related as everything is. But I remember looking at the oatmeal. You know, the oatmeal. This is an old kind of Oh, it was like this old blog with all funny things,
Oh yeah,
and they did one about the mantis shrimp. And so
yeah.
the mantis shrimp's like this ruthless creature in the sea, and it's like can crush its hand and create like mini explosions. It's heaps of stuff. It's wicked, but it's
Wow.
I think they talked about its eyesight and its vision. And dogs have two like cones of sight, so they see black and white.
Oh
Or
yeah.
we have three, I think, and it's got like seven or something. And
Oh
so it
no.
talked about when we see a rainbow, we see all the colors, the spectrum of light
Yeah.
that we can observe. And it said, and it was writing in it that said, when a mantis shrimp sees a rainbow, it must just look like an explosion of like infrared, UV, everything.
Wow.
Um, so we can see and experience what we can, within our sensory capacity to experience. And what else we can't see or what else we can't observe may be there, but we just may not be able to mantis shrimp
Yeah.
and pick it up. And there's probably a lot of things that we have, that we are limited to observe, but maybe that's all we need, and that's all we need to understand, and everything else beyond requires something else. Maybe we sense that with our belief or with our faith in something, or within something spiritual. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe our lack of physical sensory capacity to
Mm,
articulate it is put somewhere else.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely the wise position to take. Is that there's very likely way more. Well, you've articulated like in a scientific way how we know for a fact there's many channels of information which we are not, with human sense organs, are not observing, and who knows how many more channels of information exist that even scientifically we can't measure yet. So the wise approach, yeah, is as you've outlined, to assume there's vastly more happening than we're aware of.
Mm,
And the reason they bring up the sacred and stuff, I think they're talking about the meta crisis and the emotional drivers. There's some really cool stuff about left and right hemisphere that I won't go into now, but they're talking about the epidemic of loneliness and how for many people don't have any relationship to the sacred or divine in their lives, and that conversely, when you do have an actual day-to-day connection or relationship with that it can provide a lot of meaning to someone's life. But it makes me think, your game B talks about this a lot of, I think, wise traditions talk about you have to work with things as wholes, um, to get the most accurate sense of them. And if these other components of existence, sacred, transcendent, whatever labels we want to put, if they are part of this whole, then if our architecture doesn't deal with them, I think we'll always have this huge blind spot. And at the very least, acknowledging them, even for now, even if that's the most we can do, I think like that's just a wise approach for
mm,
us in laying out a proposed social architecture, right? And I guess, yeah, to deny that those things have always been a part of a human experience and that there's much we can't
mm.
see or measure, that's the best starting point, right? I guess
That's
is what I'm saying.
the known unknowns for us.
Yeah,
And then the unknown unknowns are there. There too. We know they're there, and yeah, we wouldn't be doing it. We'll be doing a disservice if we didn't acknowledge that part within our whole society. It can't just be without that, because we would be then migrating to a materialist. Everything that I can touch.
yeah, 100%.
That's going to be tricky too, like tricky to capture and articulate. And that'll
It's
be a
so loaded.
yeah, and I'll that's probably a part of yeah the big our big exploration and discussions when we engage with other people
Mm,
as our cordial here and ideas expand and we bring other people in to flesh things out. That's I think that'll be a really critical part that we need to collaborate on.
yeah,
Crowd,
100%.
collectively crowdsource. What are they called? When you open source that one.
Yeah, crowdsource. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, it made me think that animist is a distributed system of divinity, right? Because
Mm.
it's distributed amongst all things, very much like some of these distributed blockchain Web3
Mm.
systems in that sense. And I think there's general principles when you talk about this very loaded area of sacred, divine religion. Is it always gets dangerous, and there's a bit like a cult when it has to be mediated by an official. You get into risky territories. But in an animist sense, it's the living consciousness, the life force is present in all things. So anyone can have a relational experience with that. They don't need a mediating expert to tell them what it's thinking, right?
Mm.
Anywhere they go, in everything, in every object, in every place, there's a level of that other thing, that sacred thing, and they can have a direct experience of it. And so that's why I think Anisman has a lot of inbuilt safety protocols.
Mm.
Humans are very clever. We can abuse anything, and I'm sure we will. But I think we
What?
talked about things that at least when you return back to the core of it, it's a very healthy core, I think, and it will help provide stability on fleshing out that component of this social architecture.
Yeah. Um, yeah, definitely. I was gonna go and add some more, but but we'll save it for next time.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's good to put it on the radar.
Yeah.
And like you said, that might be something that's we address later, but it's part. We're only trying to work in wholes, right? We're not trying to exclude something and be like, oh, that's for something else. Everything is for everything,
Mm.
But
The whole experience.
100%.
Well, that's us. I think that wraps up. Does that wrap up Sociocraft in the Future episode 5? Is it episode 5? Not too sure.
I wanted to say the same thing, but then I was like, is it 4 or 5? Um, Let me see. I think it's 4. Feels like we've done so many
It's like
more.
we've done one
We got to step up. But that's good. This is the second week in a row
second
of
week in a
actually
row. Consistency is key.
consistency. Episode 4.
The outro credits. The outro song.
Perfect.